Welcome to Sparks of Love. My name is Jerry Lynn Sparks, and today we have in studio with us Ramos, or Ivan Ramos, depending on which way you want to say it. So welcome. I know him as Ivan, so welcome, Ivan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Ivan has a master's in divinity, which he recently got. And when I started this podcast, I thought I want to get a wide array of perspectives. And as I was planning out the guest, I thought, for someone that just went through a divinity program, there's probably a lot to be said and learned about love and divinity, how that is described. And so I thought, I would let Ivan, do an introduction of, divinity. I don't even know if I know what the term actually means in this context. So, give us a little bit of, what your master's is in,
Sure.
And we'll go from there.
Well, let me just say thank you for inviting me to this program. I'm really honored to be part of your thing that you're doing, this huge project.
Thank you.
I've listened, and it's been a great show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Scott Fitzgerald at Rockbox Studios, he does a wonderful job. The setting here is really beautiful, and it's just top-notch equipment. The sound is great. I've been really impressed with the visuals and the sounds. People are telling us that it sounds like, I've been doing this for years, and a lot of that's because of Scott. Like, he really knows what he's doing, so shout out to Scott.
No, you can tell. You don't think about the production process,
right?
When I see the podcast, and that's, I think, a good sign.
Yeah, and you were in radio, so
sounds fun.
You know what you're talking about. Ivan used to be in radio, so he understands the quality. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your master's in divinity. What led to that, and what is it?
I did this master's in divinity not looking for a master's in divinity. I kind of fell into it, and Masters in Divinity, I know that brings up a lot of connotations in people's minds.
Yeah.
My program was in the Buddhist tradition.
Okay.
Most people who do a Masters in Divinity do it in the Christian tradition.
Yeah.
And it was just a completely different bird, animal, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And it was a 3-year program. It took me 4 because I'm a little slow.
Yeah.
And
you're working too. So.
I might be a little slow today. But
and you were doing this from Puerto Rico, right? But it's here in America that you got the degree.
I started out the first year in Boulder, Colorado, Naropa University, and pandemic hit. I came back to Rochester. I was here for a year, and then I decided to go back to Puerto Rico, where I had done another master's program. And so I did the last 2 years of the program in Puerto Rico.
Now, were you born in Puerto Rico?
I was born in New York City.
Oh, okay.
And I lived in Puerto Rico for a little while as a kid and wanted to go back. And you know what? It was nice walking the beach every day, doing my walking meditation at the beach.
Yeah, I followed him on Facebook, and I was like, oh, it looks so lovely there. I've never been.
It's palm trees.
Yeah,
and it's just
that's
wonderful.
Cool. Well, tell me, what did your master's end up being about?
Well, the Master's in Divinity is really an intensive program of study which involves what is normally called theology. So we studied a lot of Buddhist scripture. We studied a lot of the communication and sort of spiritual communication coursework. And actually, presently, I'm doing a internship, which I needed to do during my coursework. But I wasn't able to get a placement in Puerto Rico, and I'm doing a chaplaincy program at Upstate Medical University Hospital, and I've got 3 more months to go on that.
So how is love informing your work that you're doing for this chaplaincy? I'm sure that love comes into play every day.
Well, love is a big part of Buddhist practice.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about loving kindness. That's our, I don't know how you would say it. I don't want to say gift to the world. It's what we give the world.
It's your service.
It's what we project forth to ourselves first. Just like they tell you on the airplane, you put your mask on first, and then on someone else, you show loving kindness to yourself and then to others, and it's a nice way to look at that.
I had a sociologist on, and I just love him to death. And he said something so interesting to me during the episode. I said that before I could be good for anybody else, that I needed to make sure I was right with myself. And he thought that Americans and our culture in particular, we focus so much on self-improvement that we're not looking to service enough. We're not leaving room in our lives for love. And I remember being in college, I went to UCLA on the West Coast, very different vibe than the East Coast, by the way.
Yes.
Some of the like West Coast chill out vibe. I loved it. It was awesome. Sunshine every day. Even though I love Rochester, let me plug that. And I got into Buddhism. I didn't really, think that I needed to be restricted to the Southern Baptist faith that I, was raised with. But I felt that it was important to, at that phase in my life, to explore different religions. And I remember reading Siddhartha and, just trying to understand something that didn't seem as judgmental to me. I think the way I was raised, I felt like religion had become like this: you cannot do this, you cannot do that. I wanted to find something that was loving and accepting and very open-minded. At that time, Buddhism kind of spoke to me. And it seems to be when people first start in college, they kind of gravitate towards the different religions and try it on like a jacket, which thing, fits me the best. Ultimately, I moved away from Buddhism, but I did go through that phase.
Yeah.
So how is love depicted in Buddhism?
Well, I would say that my spiritual journey, and I've always been what I call a spiritually precocious individual since a very early age. I had an experience after 20 years of marriage when my spouse at the time informed me that she was divorcing me, and that afterwards she would seek repentance. In our tradition,
afterwards, meaning like after death?
No, after divorce.
Oh, okay.
And in our tradition, divorce is not seen as something that one should.
And what was our tradition meaning in your marriage?
We were
Catholic?
We were in a Methodist,
Methodist.
congregation.
Okay.
And I was a dyed-in-the-wool Christian man, and I never considered any other possibility. But at that point, when she said, I'm divorcing you, and then I'll seek repentance, I kind of sat back and thought to myself, this sounds like a scam. This whole idea of grace, which is somebody dies for you and forgives your sins, and all you have to do is say, I'm sorry, and I accept all of that, and that automatically erases everything. That just didn't resonate with me, and I know for a lot of people it does. But for me, it just opened the door to inquiry and led me eventually to the Buddhist path. And I am not a proponent or in any way a preacher per se of Buddhism, because there's a real sense of Buddhism being nothingness, and that is a whole another ball of wax that can be controversial for folks to consider. But emptiness is something that is a central teaching of Buddhism, and it's not nihilistic nothingness. It's more like everything is temporary, everything is changing. Nothing is permanent. And I think that speaks beautifully to the whole concept of love.
How? I'm now confused. You have to I understand.
Love is frequently regarded as a feeling. We feel love for another.
Right.
I feel love towards you. I feel these feelings. And really feelings, all feelings, they're kind of like clouds. They come and go. Today I woke up and I felt crappy. Now I'm angry because I can't find my other shoe, or whatever it is, or sometimes big things. I'm sick now. I've gotten cancer, and I'm angry at God. I'm upset. Feelings pass; they come and go, and I think love falls into that category in many respects. That's not to say I have a very close relative who says that love and this whole thing, it really comes down to two things. It comes down to money and sex.
Really?
And there's an element of truth to it when you think about the pursuit of the sexes of each other.
I've never pursued a love interest because of money. I couldn't care less about money. I mean, if they're constantly blowing all their money, they're being irresponsible. It's not so much the money, it's the behavior that shows a reckless disregard for stability.
Sure.
So I just want to put that out there, but that's not what they're meant.
We're all different. I mean, that's a generalization. I am with you. I'm not a money-motivated individual.
Well, I like money. I'm just not going to make that my litmus test.
I love money.
Well, you know
it's
what?
Helpful.
It isn't that I like money. It's what the freedom if you have enough money.
Sure,
I'm not a person that needs to be, like a billionaire, nothing like that. But I need to have enough that I'm not stressed the hell out. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So this person believes that love is about money and sex.
That's his view. And you can make the case. But I feel like love is really this hormonal soup that is taking place in our bodies and causes us to have reactions. And if you want to look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, we got to keep the species going. So we got to make this thing attractive. That's where sex comes in. That's where love, the feelings that we get regarding love come in. And
well, in the Bible, just to bring it back to divinity, in the Bible, there's a verse that says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And that line has always stuck with me. I remember as a little girl hearing that, not really understanding it, but as I've gotten older, the way I've thought of it is that maybe our people are going to be the cloud that goes away. Maybe we're going to end up, the earth is now, animals. Maybe there's going to be a time when we don't have that. But when I was little, I thought it meant people like my son Jared who have autism, that those innocent people who have developmental disabilities, that they were going to be deserving of the earth. Like they get to have the earth. The rest of us, we're sinners. We are imperfect and we do things to damage the earth and hurt each other, start wars, where my son and people like him would never do that. They just have the simplest, most beautiful definitions of love. And I actually have some, if we get time, I can actually read you what those are. But I'm wondering about that, like for you and the pursuit of your Masters of Divinity, did love look at, through the eyes of a Buddhist philosophy, make more sense to you than the westernized versions of divinity?
Well, the whole philosophy of Buddhism, and by the way, I'm not an expert. I'm a mere practitioner.
Yeah.
And that's not false humility.
Yeah. Well, you're just getting started, I know.
I read some books, I wrote some papers, and they awarded me a degree.
Yeah. Which is not a small thing. I mean, I would love to get my graduate degree, but it's a lot of work and money, a lot of time commitment I just don't have.
It was.
So kudos to you, yeah.
But I would say that one of the central ideas of Buddhism is that impermanence of everything. And when you start to look at love through that lens, whether you're talking about feelings or from whatever lens you're talking about it, it's something that you shouldn't look at it as permanent. I mean, we think of, I'm going to get married and I will live happily ever after. That's a favorite phrase. I mean, what does that even mean, happily ever after? As we get fatter and older and crotchety and whatever we get. I mean, whatever things we get over time.
I love that phrase. You were just at my house for the New Year's Eve party. Just to let everyone know, Ivan and I have been acquaintances and friends for a number of years, and we met through the Democrat and Chronicle newspaper as bloggers. But I have a New Year's Eve party every year for the last couple of years since I've been an empty nester, and he was one of my guests the last 2 years. And over the breakfast nook, I have the sign "Happily Ever After." I don't know if you noticed that. I did that in defiance when I was having trouble in my marriage. I'm like, damn it, if I put the sign up, it's got to be true. And then when I got divorced, I was the one that asked for the divorce. I thought about leaving that sign at the old house, but then I thought my kids need this. And for me, love is more than a feeling, as you were saying earlier. For me, it was an act of service and stability. Like, we're going to have happily ever after. We're going to redefine what that means. For me, happily ever after doesn't mean like getting old and fat. It means that you put things into perspective. I don't need, like the hottest guy with the cut abs or anything anymore. I need someone who's honest and not going to cheat and who has self-respect and respect for me. And, we support each other. That's different. But happily ever after means looking at that more wizened and mature view. That's what happily ever after means for me. Disney probably different. I don't know.
Sure. Well, movies do not present reality. They're stories.
Would we watch them if they did, though? Do we need that fanciful stuff for entertainment purposes? And some of us get it skewed. We mix that facade, that entertainment facade, with the reality. And, I think when I was younger, I fell into that trap. I wanted that happily ever after in the Disney version.
But that sign, the way you interpret that sign points to me to something really valuable, which is to look at this idea of happily ever after in different lights. I think that's a wonderful thing to do.
It can be like, some people get tattoos. Some people, like I almost bought yesterday. Yesterday evening, I was kind of feeling a little bit down. And I don't even remember what it was, but it had been a long, hard, January. They're saying January was a hard year. It's post holidays and there's so much gray weather. There's this ring that I saw similar to the one I have here, hammered on it. And in the place of the silver hammering, it said, "I am enough." And that just floored me last night. And I was about to hit order. And one of my best friends called me and I felt so much better. Like, we need that human connection. But sometimes you need that reminder, you are enough. And I don't have the chiseled abs anymore. I used to be a runner and I had a twig body with cut muscles. I'm trying to be healthy, but at the same time, I need to allow myself to be the woman that I am. I'm curvy now. I have a different size and shape that I have ever had, and it took some time to accept that. You do get to buy new clothes, which is fun. But it's hard to find somebody that also is okay with that. And at the certain point, I just said, screw it. I am okay with this. I am healthy and I can hike. I hiked mountains this year. I hiked 75 miles in 2023. Wow. Felt awesome. So I am who I am. I get to that certain point. Happily ever after can, for me, then mean inside. I'm happily with who I am and where I've come to. And if it works for someone, great. If not, I'm going to have down days like I did yesterday. But for the most part, I'm happy.
I am enough. I would submit to you is.
Should I buy it? Should I buy I am enough?
It's the essence of loving kindness toward ourselves.
As a chaplain, you're probably going to use that phrase a lot, aren't you?
I'm enough. I am enough. Is that not loving my own self? To be able to say that and believe it?
Is it more beautiful to have someone say you're more than enough, for them to really see you? I think that's kind of the rub. A lot of my single friends, they're struggling with the same things that I have struggled with, is finding someone who's consistent, true. True is really important. And lets them be who they are. I think one of the things that people end up in therapy or needing, a chaplain is because somebody in their life hasn't supported them and they feel all alone. Speak a little bit about that and how you use love in that way.
I don't control other people. I can only control me.
Yep.
So I can be the best that I can be, not like the military says. I want to be the best loving person, kind person, giving person, all of those things. I can't control a potential partner. Mm-hmm. I can certainly be open to a potential partner, and potentially what I am attracts the same thing.
Right.
But ultimately, we don't control other people. And I think that...
And we run into trouble when we try. We see that all the time.
We fall in love. We have this whole thing about falling in love. Nobody, rarely do we rise in love, but how good is it for us to love ourselves and to be in a place where we can be receptive to someone else who's in that same path.
Well, let's go back here a second. You said we can't control other people, but earlier you had said when your wife said she wanted a divorce, you felt like the asking for forgiveness in retrospect was a scam. Were you subconsciously trying to control her by making her want to stay in a relationship she no longer wanted to be in?
At that time, I attempted to. I said I was married for 20 years. I made the marriage last 5 more years because I said, I don't want a divorce. If you want it, you make it happen. So
that was the control part.
And so there was a controlling element to it. At that point, I didn't have a lot of the views that I have now.
Yeah.
I really didn't. And if I did, I think I'd still be married. If one is able to be in a relationship that is in some sense equal, and I'm talking about equal rights, just, I give you, and you give me, and I take me, and you take you. We're both individuals. We're both people that choose to be together.
Choose is the operative word.
Choose very much. And I think love is also a choice. So I started out talking about love being a feeling, but love as a verb is also a choice. Mm-hmm. I choose to go up the stairs because you asked me to go get a laundry basket upstairs. So I choose to say, you know what, this is important to you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and get the laundry basket for you because I love you, because I care about you. And I'm putting myself, I don't want to say second, but I'm being of service to you. I think that's a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah, I think so. You made me think of something. There's this old phrase I'll see on social media where I'll have someone who's older than us and they'll say, well, in my day, people just worked it out. People just stayed together. And I'm like, okay, let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, you're shaming the people like me and you who have had marriages that didn't work out. In my case, my marriage involved a one-time thing of domestic violence. There's no way in hell I was going to stay married to this person when he raised his fist, broke my nose, and did a lot of other things. So in my day, how would I have worked that out? And I talked to a minister about this, and he said, well, the Bible, because I was raised in the Christian faith, does have allowances for things like that. But I also think that it's not a helpful thing to say just because you did something one way that everybody else should do that. And if they don't, then there's something faulty about them. Have a lot of friends who have gotten divorced because there is a partner that was harmful to their children. In some ways it was violence, in other ways it was substance abuse, in other ways it was mental abuse, emotional abuse. When you love your children, they're counting on you to provide a stable, positive environment. So I think as a chaplain, how do you counsel someone, you think, in the future, when you're going to these things where people are just judging the people around you that you're in charge of helping? Like, how are you going to rise above that? How do you show, a love that's more divine, like that doesn't take all this human judgment? Like, how are you going to do that?
Well, again, I don't control other people. I control myself. Mm-hmm. And I think that in a marriage relationship where one of the parties is abusive, mm-hmm. we're going to look at loving kindness toward ourselves. And certainly loving kindness toward the other person, toward the other partner, is maybe retreating and giving that person an opportunity to examine where they're at, to get counseling, to take whatever action they see as they see you backing out and them potentially losing the marriage.
Yeah.
And that all gets to this question of mindfulness, being aware of what's going on. What's going on here? And maybe that person is not in a place to be mindful, to be loving. They're all selfish. I need to love myself. I need to love others around me, and I need to do whatever I need to do.
Yeah. One of probably the best things that I could say about the ex is years after the divorce, there was a restraining order that had expired. And so he was then allowed to send letters. And one day I got a letter from my lawyer. And in the letter, it was my divorce. I served him divorce papers. And in it, he had inserted an apology letter. If he had sent that immediately after thing, I wouldn't have heard it. But with time and passage, I'm like, okay, I need to hear for my own healing, his version. And he apologized. And it doesn't mean that I ever want to see him again. I don't. There's so much of a bridge that not only was burned, but was napalmed. Definitely napalmed that bridge. But having that apology was really important. And I think, I don't know much about Buddhism, but in Divinity, what is the role of not only offering an apology, but to accepting the apology?
It's wonderful to receive the apology. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily coming for most people. Yeah. You're never going to get an apology, or you won't get it in time. Again, I control me. Mm-hmm. I control my thought process. I control my heart. I have the ability through meditation, through mindful practice, to come to terms with what is reality, what is really happening, mm-hmm. and let go of the illusion, the delusion, and all of that. And so it's a bonus, I guess, to get an apology like that. Yeah. But many times the other person never even comes to that place. I think you were lucky to get an apology. Yeah.
I don't ever want to say the words lucky in association with him, but I know what you're trying to say there. One of the things about love and divinity from my, Western Christian perspective, there was something very beautiful about forgiveness. And it is, as therapists have said, and I'm sure people have heard this on social media, sometimes you're not forgiving for that person, you're forgiving for yourself. So you don't hold that bitterness in. And I think at the time, I really was very, very bitter, and I wasn't allowing love in other ways. I had love for my children and no room for really anything else. And I think having that apology and having it in writing, like, aha, this is a person who actually sees the harm that they did and has contrition. And they were a minister's son. You know, I loved my ex-father-in-law. I just loved him. And he died before he became my ex-father-in-law. And he was a Methodist, you know, like you and your wife had been in the relationship. And I just think, like, forgiving yourself is a big thing. And I had to go through therapy to say, okay, where did I contribute to the negative things in the relationship? One of the things that I have had to work on a lot in order to be a good and loving person to my friends and to probably potential, you know, future love interests is to stop being a fixer, to start listening to them and just listening. And
that's mindful. That's mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yeah. As the oldest child, it's hard. I had parents that argued a lot, and so I was always trying to keep the peace. And I find myself, even in my career, I've been the conciliator, and I work in relationship management, basically. So I've always been, you know, as a press secretary for a congressman, trying to mend his relationship with the press. So I was always that soothsayer liaison type, and I still am for, you know, career. And I find with my children, I had to learn to stop trying to fix it. And every now and then I'll slip. I think I've been really good about it, but then last night I messed up. Last night excuse me, I offered a solution to my daughter last night, and she got mad, and rightfully so. And I had to go, I am sorry. I apologize. You just wanted somewhere to put that. And I was trying to fix it because I have a fixer. It's a hard thing, and I admit I struggle with that. I am enough, but sometimes I'm not perfect.
I would say from my perspective, it wasn't an issue of getting or receiving forgiveness from my spouse. It was a question of I was so subsumed into the marriage. I had become such a little person.
You have four kids?
I have 4 daughters.
Yeah.
I was so subsumed into that marriage that I basically felt like, looking back, I had disappeared. I needed to come to terms with me. It was almost like I needed to recognize who I really am, the pluses and the minuses, and just come to terms with myself and almost, in a sense, forgive myself for the path that I had led, which I felt I had led it out of ignorance. And it really was. I did many ignorant things. That's what we do. But I had to come to terms of the loving kindness toward myself. So when I say that you were lucky to get that, you were fortunate. We can put it in many different ways. You were blessed that you got this letter requesting.
It's unexpected.
Yeah. But in my case, I had to do that for myself.
Yeah.
And I've been very successful in that. And I can also give room to my spouse. I'm not in the place where I was.
Yeah.
My ex-spouse. I can give her the room to be who she is, where she's at. It's her life. She's responsible for her. I'm responsible for me.
Do you still love her?
I think somewhere deep down inside I do. You know, we spent a lot of time together. Yeah. We made 4 babies, and we had a lot of practice doing that.
Yeah.
So
the whole money and sex thing comes back in.
but that chapter is closed. It's
has love for her evolved into some different kind of love?
I honestly don't know. I don't have a lot of relationship with her. You know, we've been cordial of late. We've been less than cordial. Life goes on. Yeah. Things unfold.
Yeah.
You know.
But I don't have any interaction at all with my ex. He was sent away, and there was orders of protection. So the last time I saw him, I was running away from him. He was attacking me, and I remember looking over my shoulder and seeing him standing, wondering why isn't he chasing me? But I'd slugged him. It's a more than I want to get into here. But the last time I ever saw him, like in our married life, was that. And the last time I ever saw him ever was in court. And he was in shackles. It was very humiliating. It was awful. So we never got that. I don't know if there's such a thing as closure. So that letter that I got was the closest thing. I've never responded. I remember defiantly not looking at him in court, and I said that he used to love my eyes, and he'll never get to see them again. I'm never going to put eyes on him. And the whole time in court, I stared straight ahead, determined what I was going to do. So I didn't get to see a love turn into something else. It just went from I love you, I love you, I love you to boom, like absolutely gone. So I think that prolonged my recovery. But it's been so long now. I'm very really happy place, very successful. But I'm always interested to see when people get divorced. Like I don't, even if I end up dating, a man who has an ex-wife, I'm not going to deny them that, that happy, different kind of love that they would feel.
Sure.
Like I look at Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner, like they co-parent their children beautifully. That's showing service love to their children.
There's maturity. One can find a mature place where we're adults. We can treat each other like adults. We can respect each other, which is very important.
Yeah.
We don't have to knock each other in front of the kids or behind the kids. It doesn't matter.
Especially not in front of the kids.
We can be grown-ups.
One of the things that was really helpful, a therapist, maybe 2 weeks after the divorce, and I'd been attacked. I was very, very angry, rightfully so. A therapist said to me, make sure you feel your anger, you own it, you work through it, but don't do it in front of the kids. She goes, the things that you say about the other parent, they're going to internalize. So especially the same sex. So the things I said about the father of my children, then the boys, I have 3 boys and a girl, will internalize, oh, I come from that. I must be that. And your daughter, oh, well, this is how all men are. And so I had to work on that because I had so much anger. And, they all do have a relationship with their dad, except for my oldest, who has autism and intellectual disabilities, and he's having none of it. But for the others, they have, a decent relationship with him. I'm incredibly close, with my children. But I think that's a form of love, like allowing this space. And it was really hard for me. It was incredibly hard for me to even allow them to talk to him, like to receive the first letter. And that showed my discomfort. I was willing to make myself
But you're a human being.
Yeah.
You felt what you felt.
Yeah.
We can't deny that.
Yeah. I think the most loving thing I did was put my own needs aside, which was to keep him out of my life and realize my children have needs, which is to know they come from something good. It can be good. And let them make their own decisions. That was hard. That protective mother nature was having to fight with the need for the children. That was really hard.
But there's a whole thoughtful process that you've engaged in. And a lot of times we let our feelings get the better part of us. And we don't allow ourselves to be logical. Logic is difficult in love. But still, if you can be thoughtful and think things through and not just anger is the biggest one, man. That one just takes over like a forest fire.
Yeah.
If we can be mindful, if we can come to a place where we can see things for what they are and for what they're not, I think we put ourselves in a better position.
I was on the drive over here. I always hear this great music right before I do a podcast. And I don't know the song or the artist. I think it may have been Phoebe Bridgers, who I'm really into right now. But the line in the song was, I wanted atonement, and you said no regrets, and I was offended. And I love that line. It's brilliant songwriting, but think about that. The person wanted to be able to say, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And when the person that they were in love with, according to the song, said, oh, no regrets, they felt, this person saying it felt robbed. She wanted to be found at fault and to say, I'm sorry. And the other person saying no regrets. Why do you think that would be? Is it the person's detached, aloof? They don't give a flying flip anymore? Like, what could that be?
We're each in our own place. We're each in that labyrinthine place called the brain and the heart and our hormones and all that mixes in. And it, you know what? I mentioned logic. A lot of times logic is not going to come into play, and we just need to be with that. It's like, well, that's the way this person is. That's the way maybe I am.
Yeah.
We do the best we can.
Well, recently I was upset with someone and just absolutely, I was not doing well. I was upset. And then when I finally did, hear from them, they owned it. They said they were sorry that they hurt me. And that's what I needed. And I did, but I wasn't a doormat, and this is where I want to bring in this book. So there's this book that everyone loves, but a lot of us hate. It's called The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. And this is the copy I had. I used to read to my kids at night. I saved it. And there's very few books from their childhood that don't have applesauce and orange juice all over them. This one is stayed in pretty pristine shape. And that's mainly because I only read it, I think, twice. Because after the first time I read it, the kids were like, oh, it's so nice. And I thought, okay, maybe it is. And then I read it again to them. And in the middle of reading it to them, I was like, wait a minute. The tree in the Giving Tree is making themselves a doormat. The boy, so just to give, for the few people on earth that don't know what the Giving Tree is about, it's an African parable that that Shel Silverstein, morphed into his own story. And the Giving Tree and the boy are, growing up together. It's a little tree and a little boy. And the boy, plays with her when he's little, and he swings from her branches, and he has, tree forts around it. Like that's his place, his play place. And then he becomes a teenager, and he gets interested in girls, and he stops spending time with the tree. And then he goes away and becomes an adult and needs a house. And he actually comes and chops off the tree's branches and uses them until over time, he needs her and needs her and needs her, and he chops her down to a stump. And everyone's thinking, oh, she was so giving. Look how wonderful she was. And in the end, he's an old man. The boy's an old man. And he comes up to her, and the tree's like, she's exhausted by this point. Like, she's had it. She's like, hey, dude, I have nothing left to give to you. And he goes, well, I'm old now. I don't need anything. I just need a place to sit. And the book says, well, straighten herself up a little bit like that. I do have a nice place for you to sit. And everyone thinks it's such a beautiful story and that it's about selfless service and giving and giving. The way I saw it, and I think a lot of people see it, is that the tree had allowed herself to be used until she was nothing more than a stump. And I don't find this as a beautiful story. I find it as a cautionary story of how not to properly love someone. It's not a give and take relationship. So talk to me a little bit about that. Because in just one more thing. So the person that had upset me, I did let them know. I wasn't like screaming at them, but I did say, I was worried sick. Like I really thought I had offended you, and like I was really hurt. And the apology was authentic, and so, everything's smoothed over now. But the Giving Tree, it always is a cautionary tale for me to how you should treat your parents and, people that you love.
There's old thinking and there's new thinking.
Okay.
Things are always evolving. Okay. When I look at that book, I think of Thich Nhat Hanh, a great Buddhist teacher who died, I think, early last year. He's written, I'm not sure if it's a poem or it's a story, but he talks about, he makes the analogy of the tree, the leaf falling from the tree. And is the tree sad because it's losing its leaves in fall and autumn? And there's this whole conversation that takes place with the leaf having been part of the tree, falling to the ground, feeding the tree again. Into that mix comes the sunshine, comes the earth, come all the elements that make the tree, that make the leaves, that make all these things. And the process that he describes that as he calls it interbeing. And in interbeing, there's this connection between everything. So I am you, you are me, and that's not some new age, newfangled idea. If you look in nature, you can see that. When we die, when our body goes back to the earth, we become part of the earth, and everything gets regenerated.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
That's a very Buddhist concept.
Okay.
And that is that in essence is really more of a realistic view of how things are, and coming to a place of mindfulness where you can accept that, where we can say, yes, I see that, I understand that. There's a real peace that comes out of that.
So are you saying that the way I interpret the Giving Tree is old thinking because I feel offended by the way the person was used down to literally a stump?
I'm not judging you. I'm questioning, and I haven't read the book. I'm questioning whether the book is written from an old way of thinking, where something gets used and used and used and used until you're not useful anymore, and then I just put you aside.
It is. For me, it reminded me of the Methodist. So my ex-father-in-law was a Methodist. He had a doctorate or THD, theology doctorate. And one of the tenets of Methodism, if I'm not mistaken, is service. Like service is a huge part of that particular form of love and divinity. Love, we show our love by acts of service. And I'm a member of Rochester Rotary, and one of the things that we have is acts of service. It's really important. And that's really important to me. I do a lot of volunteer work, and not for self-aggrandizement, and I'm not even saying it
Sure.
for accolades here. I'm just saying that service is a really important part to me. It says a lot about how I was raised and what I would like to see in the people around my life. Like, what are you doing to make this world better? Leave it better than you found it. But for this book, the thing that got to me is that only one person's giving. You don't give in order to receive in return. I get that. But it does seem that I don't know what the boy's giving here. It seems to be conditional upon receiving something. That's the part I have trouble with.
I read the synopsis, and and it does point to that controversy. I mean, that's a controversial aspect of this book.
Yeah.
And Shel Silverstein was a guy. I mean, he wrote a book.
Am I missing something? I keep thinking, like, I introspect. Am I forgetting something? Am I not seeing something here? Am I using that Western brain of mine? Is there something in it? I want to make sure. I am totally willing to accept that I may not be reading this from the right perspective. But with my kids, like I even have, I've raised such wonderful kids. And the other day, my daughter called me, and she just, she's ready to blurt something out. And then she stops herself about 2 minutes in. I haven't even said hello yet. She just heard me pick up. It's like, Mom, da, 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 da. And I'm just sitting there, and she waits, and she goes, oh, how are you? So she got it. She stopped herself. So I know that she's getting to be more mature now.
Capable of that.
I've been guilty of the same thing where you're just like, you cannot wait to talk to someone. You like word, splurge, instead of saying, is this a good time to talk? How are you? How was your day? Can you receive what I'm getting ready to unload on you,
That's me. I get that.
Really?
Oh my gosh. It's just too much energy, too much passion. Raise the voice. It's like,
well, that's interesting for a chaplain. So this is going to be very instructive for you.
Not just a chaplain, but a Buddhist. I've been questioned. It's like, how can you even be Buddhist? Because you're so like, oh my gosh. It's like, well, Buddhism is not about being quiet. It's not about being monk-like. It's not about, this. I mean, there's a place for meditation.
Yeah.
But you know what? Buddhism is really about gaining control of your thoughts, your mental process, and recognizing what's reality around us. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned my thesis. I mentioned a bunch of things in my thesis, but thinking about the dollar bill. What's a dollar bill? Come on. It's a piece of paper.
It represents something.
No. It represents, but what is that? We've given it meaning, mm-hmm. and people give their lives for that meaning. But it's a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And some people spend their whole lives gathering pieces of paper, and then they've got lots of paper.
Yeah. Some people in Gen Z I've heard say this, money isn't real. Like there's starting to be a cultural shift in how people are viewing the value of money and what it is. There's that whole concept of universal basic income. It's interesting. I think it organizes society. It encourages work and innovation. So it depends on which, way you're looking at it. But
there's a shift. There's a shift in society, and I think people are seeing what's real, what's not real. And, we look at our politicians, mm-hmm. we look at our religious leaders. Yeah. A lot of that is smoke and mirrors.
A lot of it. I worked in politics. I can attest to that. We only have about 2 minutes, though, so I don't want to go down that wormhole, even though, well, maybe I do, but I don't have time. Yeah. But I did want to ask you, can you give, and for love and divinity, that's the theme of this episode, your favorite example of love in any form of religion? For me, I always think of Mary Magdalene washing the feet of Jesus. I'm not a hyper-religious person by any means, but as a kid, that was beautiful. Like the love that she had when he was on the cross, the mother and Mary Magdalene together, suffering for the person who's suffering for the love of the world. I can tear up right now. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. So that's my favorite. What is yours?
I mean, when I look at the writing of Shantideva, who wrote, it's really a book. It's titled The Way of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is the person who puts off gaining enlightenment until others have the opportunity to gain enlightenment for themselves. And that's a practice of Mahayana Buddhism, which is the branch that I participate in. And I guess I would say regarding this whole issue of love, we should keep in mind that there's two oars that we can use to row our love boat. and one is mindfulness. The other one is loving kindness. I think that both of those are key as we practice them toward ourselves and as we practice them toward other people. It's just a question of being present, seeing what's real, recognizing what feelings are, and just going with that.
Maybe, I love that story you just told. Maybe that's what the giving tree really is. Maybe that's the lesson I've been missing. You said putting off your own enlightenment until others have the opportunity to experience enlightenment themselves. Maybe that's what the story's about. And I think you just taught me something. I think my mind is blown.
We'll have to look. I got to read that book.
Maybe I don't hate this book. So interesting. I love when I learn something live on camera. Anyway, well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ivan Ramos. I hope you have a good rest of your week. And thank you for listening to Sparks of Love. And I hope you have a good rest of your week.